Good morning, church. I find it interesting how unexpected some things are in the Bible. I mean that in this sense. Worldly wisdom, while seemingly commonsensical, is often wrong. Here's some examples. Matthew chapter 10, verse 39. Whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. Matthew 23:11. The greatest among you will be your servant. 2 Corinthians 12:10. When I am weak, then I am strong. Today I want to talk to you about blind Bartimaeus and how he's contrasted to the religious leaders and the disciples in the book of Mark, in particular the 10th chapter. Before I read to you about Bartimaeus, let me give you a little context as far as the religious leaders and the disciples go. If there were two groups in the book of Mark that should have had a good grasp on who Jesus was, it should have been the religious leaders and the disciples. First, the Jewish religious leaders, they knew the Old Testament, which clearly points to Christ, but they missed the Messiah. Second, the disciples, at least in the middle of Jesus' ministry, these are people who walked with Jesus, talked with him, served with Jesus. On a daily basis, they were under the tutelage of God himself. However, they continually missed the words of Jesus, and they often even sought their own advancement. In the 10th chapter, the religious leaders and the disciples, they miss what Jesus is saying on the topics of divorce, the value of children, how to receive eternal life, the resurrection, and ambition. In all of these cases, it seems clear that these people lacked humility in the presence of God. Then, at the end of the 10th chapter, we read about blind Bartimaeus. We see this in verses 46 through 52 of the 10th chapter. Then they reached Jericho, and as Jesus and his disciples left town, a large crowd followed him. A blind beggar named Bartimaeus was sitting beside the road. When Bartimaeus heard that Jesus of Nazareth was nearby, he began to shout, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." "Be quiet," many of the people yelled at him, but he only shouted louder, "Son of David, have mercy on me." When Jesus heard him, he stopped and said, "Tell him to come here." So they called the blind man. "Cheer up," they said. "Come on, he's calling you." Bartimaeus threw aside his coat, jumped up, and came to Jesus. "What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus asked. "My rabbi," the blind man said, "I want to see." And Jesus said to him, "Go, for your faith has healed you." Instantly the man could see, and he followed Jesus down the road. The religious leaders missed it. The disciples missed it. It was the blind beggar who got it right. The religious leaders who were scholars, the scholars missed it. The people who hung out with Jesus, this was the disciples, they missed it. But again, the blind man got it. What's the difference? Why did Bartimaeus see, even though he was blind, and the others missed it, even though they had eyesight? I think the answer, for one, is faith. The text clearly says that. But another is humility. Bartimaeus, he knew his lowly state, and he believed Christ, and he knew that Christ alone could save him. The religious leaders and the disciples, at least at this point in Jesus' ministry, they placed a lot of faith in themselves, and this pride kept them from faith. Let me share one more thing with you, and this comes from C.S. Lewis's book, The Great Divorce. The main character gets to go to heaven for a period of time, and while he's there, he sees a glorious person, a person who in heaven seems to be quite a big deal. And this is how it goes. Is it? I whispered to my guide. "Not at all," he said. "It's someone you never would have heard of. Her name on earth was Sarah Smith, and she lived at Golders Green. She seemed to be, a person of particular importance. She was one of the great ones. You've heard that fame in this country and fame on earth are two quite different things." It goes on to speak of Sarah, not for her earthly accomplishments, but for her humility and her faithfulness to Christ. She seemed to be of little importance on earth, but in heaven, she was of great importance. As you go through your week, I want you to think about this. We are to use our minds as the Jewish leaders did, and we are to associate with Christ on a daily basis as the disciples did. But don't let any of that keep you from remembering that he is the object of our faith. Jesus is the object of our faith, and in him alone is our salvation. I'll be praying for you. Keep praying for me. I'll see you next week.